Hello and welcome back to another Ourdadsstamps video. After a bit of a break where I spent time with my family and I've spent time reorganising my own collection, I thought it was about time I did another video, so here we go. And for today's video I thought I'd look at the stamps of the Seychelles. Now, the Seychelles, or as it's officially known now, the Republic of Seychelles, is an island country off the coast of Africa consisting of 155 islands. Many of those islands are uninhabited, but they have been dedicated as nature reserves. It's about 1,500 kilometres east of Africa in the Indian Ocean and has a population of about 100,000 people. The Seychelles were actually uninhabited until the 18th century when Europeans arrived, and it became a British colony in 1814, where it remained until it gained independence in 1976, and it is now a member of the British Commonwealth. The first post office in the Seychelles wasn't opened until December 1861, and this was in Victoria, the capital of the Seychelles. And at that time they used the stamps of Mauritius, which were cancelled with a B64 cancellation. It's well worth looking out for the Mauritius stamps, if you have any, with a B64 cancellation, because they're worth quite a bit more simply due to being cancelled in the Seychelles rather than in Mauritius. It was not until 1890 that the first Seychelles stamps were issued, and these are the familiar Queen Victoria key type stamps, and the first set runs from 2 cents up to 98 cents. But it's worth looking closely at these because there are actually two different dies. Looking at the pictures, it's quite easy to tell the difference between the two. The tiara on the Queen's head, in die 1 there's some shading around the diadem in the middle, whereas in die 2 this is completely clear. Now, as I said, that's easy to see on a picture, and it's not too difficult to see in the stamps that I've shown. But if you've got one that's been cancelled or one that's a little bit grubby, then it's not quite so easy to find this out. However, it's definitely worth looking because the die 1 stamps are worth twice as much in a lot of cases than the die 2 stamps. So definitely one to look out for. Another thing to look out for with the Victorian stamps is there were a lot of the stamps that were surcharged with different values when there were changes in the postage rates. And these surcharges tended to be done locally. Now, as often happens in this case with the local surcharges, there are often mistakes made and there are numerous varieties to look out for with the surcharges. And once again, some of these can be extremely valuable. So if you have some of the surcharges, look closely for things like the surcharge inverted or the double printing. It's certainly going to add value to the stamps and make them very worthwhile having. The Edward VII stamps, again, were the familiar key type stamps with Edward VII's image on the front. And these come in two different watermarks, the Crown CA and the Multiple Crown CA. Both sets run from 2 cents up to 2 rupees 25 and have a catalogue value of around about £150 mint and £200 used. Fairly expensive, but again, as usual, it's only the high values that are the expensive ones. You can certainly get hold of the lower values quite reasonably. And then when King George V came along, once again it used the key type images of George V, and as with most Commonwealth stamps, there's a few different watermarks. There's the Multiple Crown CA and the Multiple Script CA watermarks. Both of these run from 2 cents up to 5 rupees and again have similar values of around about £200 mints, £400 used. What makes the Seychelles stand out from most of the other British Commonwealth countries is that when it came to printing the King George VI pictorials, The Seychelles used photogravure print by Harrison, whereas most other Commonwealth countries were using recess printed stamps. So this makes them stand out, and the look of the stamps is very different and quite effective in my opinion. The set from 1938 runs from 2 cents up to 5 rupees and consists of 25 stamps. The basic set has a catalogue value of £550 mint, £275 used. So certainly the mint versions are quite pricey, and as usual it's the top end that's the pricey stamps. Although there are some colour changes throughout that are more valuable than some of the others. The other thing with this set is that they were printed on 2 different types of paper. Chalk surface paper was generally used, but also ordinary paper, and there's a big difference in the value between the types of paper. Now, telling the difference between chalk surface paper and ordinary paper is something that I found very difficult. The traditional method of identifying chalk surface paper has been if you touch it with silver wire, a black mark is left on the paper, whereas with the ordinary paper it does nothing. However, whilst those black marks can be removed with a normal pencil rubber, there can be some damage, so it's not recommended to use this method, and it basically comes down to experience in that chalk surface paper is generally clearer and smoother than ordinary paper, and under good magnification you can see tiny bubbles or marks on the surface of the stamp. However, as I said, this is not always easy to see, especially when you have a used stamp, so it's one of those things you have to try and get round, and if you really want the expensive ones, buy them from a reputable dealer who will be able to identify which ones are the chalk surface paper and which ones are the ordinary paper. In 1952, the King George VI pictorials were redesigned with a new image of the King, and these run from 2 cents up to 10 rupees with a total of 15 values. Luckily these were only printed in chalk surface paper, so we don't have the problem of identifying the paper type. However, one thing to look out for with this set is that there were mistakes with the watermarks, and they should have been printed on multiple script CA paper. But in some of the paper the crown was missing, and in others a St Edward's crown was used. And these certainly make a huge difference to the value of the stamp, so it's definitely something to look out for, and definitely worth getting watermark detectors or some way of finding the watermark to make sure the stamp you've got is not one of these varieties. As an example, the 2 cent lilac has a catalogue value of 75 cents mint, but if you have one with the crown missing, that rockets up to catalogue value of £850. The designs on these stamps were largely reused when the Queen Elizabeth set was issued in 1954, and they followed more or less the same format with an image of Queen Elizabeth rather than the King. And once again, these run from 2 cents up to 10 rupees. These are much easier to get hold of with a catalogue value of just £100 mint, £65 used, so definitely a set to look out for, and quite a nice set as well. In 1962, a new pictorial set was issued with completely new designs in multicolour, and these stand out as something quite different again. These run from 5 cents up to 10 rupees, and these are relatively easy to get hold of, cataloguing at £75 mint and only £50 used. The 10 rupee stamp is larger than all the others, and they're a mix of portrait and landscape style stamps showing various images and products from around the Seychelles. Another new pictorial set was issued in 1969, and I have to say I'm yet to be convinced about this set. They have a white border with a multicoloured picture in the corner and the Queen's head in grey on the border, but somehow they don't look quite so nice for me. They don't quite do it. This set shows some of the history of the island, so they're worth looking at just to get an idea of what's happened in the Seychelles and some of the history of the country. But as I said before, I'm not convinced with the design, and maybe they could have done better. The catalogue value is very, very reasonable at £28, mint £48 used. There are two types of paper to look at on this set though. Some of the values were printed on white paper, whereas in general they were printed on slightly toned paper. Now, you would obviously need both types to be able to tell the difference between the two, and you'd also have to distinguish between whether the paper was toned after printing or whether that's the way it was printed. So you need to be a bit careful with that one, but if you want the full set, then there are 11 different values that were printed on white paper and 18 values printed on the slightly toned paper. As I said at the beginning of this video, many of the islands on the Seychelles are dedicated as nature reserves, and so you would expect wildlife and nature to figure quite a lot in the Seychelles stamps, and this is indeed the case. There are many sets featuring birds. Particularly nice sets are 1972, which consists of only 6 stamps. These are a very striking set and run from 5 cents up to 3 rupees 50. Not the cheapest, but not extortionate, so certainly ones to look out for. And then in 1979, 1980 and 1981, there were 3 sets issued in different series. The first one features the Seychelles Foddy, and there's 5 stamps all valued at 2 rupees. The second series features the Seychelles Kestrel, and once again there's 5 stamps all at 2 rupees each. And finally the third series is of the White Tern, and again it's 5 stamps all of 2 rupee value. Nice sets to look for and not expensive at all, so definitely one for the thematic collector. In 1983 there's a really nice set inscribed as Zil Elwan Seychelles and Seychelles underneath, and this is a set of 16 stamps which runs from 5 cents to 20 rupees, and as I said, it's a really nice set of stamps. Now, this was a very strange thing that the Seychelles did in the 1980s. Between 1980 and 1982, they issued stamps that were inscribed with Zil Eloin Seychelles. Then from 1982 to 84, it was Zil Elwan Seychelles. And in 1985 to 1992, they were Elwanien Seychelles. Now, I have no idea whether I pronounced any of those words correctly, but hopefully you'll understand what I mean. And these stamps were issued for the outer islands of the Seychelles, and they were served by a travelling post office. Now, this stopped in 1992, and it seems a very strange thing to do. Why they couldn't just use Seychelles stamps, I don't honestly know. Whether it was just a money-making exercise, I'm not entirely sure. But as I said, there's ostensibly three different countries to look out for, which are all actually part of the Seychelles. And there are some nice sets among those, so definitely worth looking out for. And if you want a complete collection of the Seychelles, then I suggest that you should probably include these. More nature sets to look out for. In 1977, there's a nice wildlife set to look out for, and that runs from 5 cents to 20 rupees. Again, not hugely expensive and well worth looking out for and collecting. Another set to look out for was issued in 1993, and this is quite a nice set to get. It runs from 10 cents to 50 rupees, and the two higher values, 25 rupees and 50 rupees, are considerably more expensive in terms of catalogue value than the others, so it should be easy enough to collect the set up to 15 rupees. The other two may be a little bit more difficult to find. And the last one I'm going to mention is a set of marine life that was issued in 2003. This runs from 10 cents to 50 rupees. And again, the 50 rupee stamp is quite a lot more expensive than the rest of the set, but you should be able to get up to 25 rupees quite easily. And this is quite a nice set. There's 14 stamps in the whole set, so definitely one worth a look. As with all Commonwealth countries, there are many stamps and sets with royalty themes on them. For an island nation, there's surprisingly few with ships on them for the Seychelles, but plenty of other things to look out for the thematic collector. So I hope you enjoyed this little look round the stamps of Seychelles. There's certainly some different stamps to look out for in terms of their design and the printing type, but also lots of varieties as well. So something to get your teeth into if you want to become a serious collector of Seychelles stamps. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to be back in a couple of weeks' time with another video from Ourdadsstamps.